January 14th, 1943, Eagle Farm Airfield, Brisbane, Australia. The heat rose in waves from the red dirt runway. 6 B-17 Flying Fortresses descended through the morning haze, their silver bodies catching the sun like falling coins. One by one, they touched down, tires screaming against the earth, propellers throwing dust into the air that hung there like smoke. Major Silas Thornwood stood at the edge of the tarmac, arms crossed, watching them land. He was 42 years old, though the lines around his eyes made him look older. His uniform was clean but faded. His hands, calloused and stained with engine grease, gripped a clipboard so tight the knuckles had gone white. The bombers taxied toward the hangar line. Ground crews ran out to meet them. Pilots climbed down from open hatches, faces streaked with sweat and oil. They did not smile. They did not celebrate. They only walked slowly toward the debriefing tent. Silas knew what the numbers would say before anyone spoke them. He had seen this scene too many times. The B-17S had flown 7,000 feet above the Bismarck Sea. They had dropped their payloads on a Japanese convoy, 16 ships moving in perfect formation. And they had missed. Again. The intelligence officer approached, holding a red folder. "One hit, Major. A near miss on a destroyer. No confirmed sinks." Silas looked at the folder. He did not open it. "1 out of 20 bombs," the officer continued. "That's 0.05% effectiveness." The sun beat down. Somewhere in the distance a crow called out, sharp and mocking. Silas turned and walked back toward the hangar. The officer followed. "Sir, the crews did everything right. The Norden bomb site is accurate. The problem is altitude. By the time the bombs fall 7,000 feet, the ships have already moved." Silas stopped walking. He stared at the hangar doors, massive and rusted, half open like the mouth of a cave. "I know what the problem is." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the pilots want to go lower, but at that altitude, the anti-aircraft guns will tear them apart. It's suicide." Silas turned to face him. "And what we're doing now? Dropping bombs into the ocean while Japanese reinforcements land safely on New Guinea? What would you call that?" The officer had no answer. Silas walked away. Inside the hangar, the air was thick with the smell of oil and paint thinner. Mechanics worked on a damaged B25 Mitchell, its nose cone removed, exposing the aluminum skeleton beneath. Silas walked past them without speaking. He climbed the stairs to his office, a cramped room overlooking the hangar floor, and closed the door. On his desk sat a photograph. A woman, dark-haired and smiling, holding a little girl. The girl wore a white dress and clutched a stuffed rabbit. Beneath the photograph, a letter, still sealed. Silas sat down. He picked up the photograph, ran his thumb across the glass, then set it back down carefully. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. In the darkness, he saw the ocean. The Pacific, stretching endlessly in all directions. And on that ocean, burning ships, men screaming, water turning red. It was May 1942. The Battle of the Coral Sea. Silas had been a naval aviator then, flying reconnaissance missions from the carrier Lexington. He had been good at it, fast, precise, fearless, until the day his wingman, Lieutenant Marcus Holloway, took a direct hit from a Zero fighter. The plane had exploded mid-air, a burst of orange flame that vanished as quickly as it appeared. No parachute, no chance. Silas had watched it happen, had done nothing, could do nothing. 2 weeks later, he requested a transfer, ground duty, engineering. Anything but flying. They sent him to Australia. He told himself it was for the best, told himself he could do more good designing aircraft than flying them, told himself the guilt would fade. It had not faded. A knock on the door pulled him back to the present. "Come in." The door opened. A man stepped inside, tall and thin, with sharp features and wire-rimmed glasses. Major Everett Caldwell, 38 years old, a bombardier turned tactician. He carried a rolled-up map under one arm. "Silas, you got a minute?" Silas gestured to the chair across from his desk. Caldwell sat down, unrolled the map, and spread it across the cluttered surface. It showed the northern coast of New Guinea, the Bismarck Sea, and a red line traced from Rabaul to Lai. "Intelligence just confirmed it," Caldwell said, tapping the map. "The Japanese are moving a convoy, 8 transports, 8 destroyers, carrying the 51st Division, 6,900 men. They'll reach Lai in 3 weeks.
Nye. Silas leaned forward, studying the map. "And if they land?" Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Our boys on the ground are already outnumbered 3-1. If another 7,000 Japanese soldiers show up, we lose New Guinea. And if we lose New Guinea..." He did not need to finish. Losing New Guinea meant losing Australia. Losing Australia meant losing the Pacific. Silas stared at the red line on the map. It looked so simple, just a line, just numbers, but he knew better.
Those 6,900 men were sons, brothers, husbands, just like the American soldiers waiting on the beaches of New Guinea. "What do you want from me, Everett?" Caldwell pulled a photograph from his jacket pocket and placed it on the desk. It showed the wreck of an old cargo ship, the SS Pruth, half submerged near Port Moresby. "I've been testing a new bombing technique, low altitude, 250 feet. We skip the bombs across the water like stones on a river. They hit the ship at the waterline and detonate inside the hull." Silas picked up the photograph. The wreck was riddled with holes. "You're hitting a stationary target. A convoy moves." "I know, that's why I need you." Caldwell leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Silas, high-altitude bombing doesn't work. We both know it. But if we go low, the anti-aircraft guns will shred us before we drop the payload. Unless..." He paused. "Unless what?" "Unless we silence the guns first. And to do that, we need something the Japanese have never seen before. Something so fast, so overwhelming, they don't have time to react." Silas set the photograph down. "You want me to design a weapon? I want you to redesign one. The B25 Mitchell. Strip out the bombardier station, mount forward-facing machine guns in the nose, turn the bomber into a gunship, let the pilots aim by flying straight at the target and pulling the trigger." Silas stared at him. "That's insane."
"Nye. It's necessary." Silence filled the room. Outside, the sound of hammering echoed through the hangar. Silas shook his head. "Everett, I'm not a weapons designer, I'm just an engineer. And even if I could do what you're asking, there's no guarantee it would work. You'd be risking pilots' lives on an untested theory." Caldwell stood up, rolling the map. "We're already risking their lives, Silas, every day. At least give them a fighting chance." He turned toward the door, then stopped.
"You know what the boys call you? The mechanic who stopped flying. They don't blame you for stepping down, but they wonder what you're running from." He left before Silas could respond. Silas sat alone in the office. The photograph of his wife and daughter stared at him from the desk. He picked it up, studied Sarah's face. 6 years old, bright eyes, innocent. He set the photograph down and looked out the window at the hangar floor below. Mechanics swarmed over the damaged B-25 like ants on a carcass. One of them, a young private, no older than 20, caught Silas's eye and waved. Silas raised his hand slowly. That night, he could not sleep. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of generators. Around him, other officers snored softly, lost in dreams. Silas thought about the convoy. 6,900 men crossing the sea in 3 weeks. He thought about the American soldiers on New Guinea, 10,000 of them, waiting, hoping for reinforcements that would never come. At 2 in the morning, he got up, dressed, and walked across the airfield. The hangar was dark except for a single lamp hanging above the B-25. The mechanics had gone to bed hours ago. The bomber sat in silence, its nose cone still removed, exposing the hollow interior. Silas climbed inside. The space where the bombardier once sat was empty now, just bare metal and wiring. He knelt down, running his hands along the frame, feeling the rivets, the seams, the places where stress would concentrate if too much weight was added to the front. He took out a pencil and notebook from his pocket and began sketching. 8 Browning .50 caliber machine guns, 4 on each side of the nose, synchronized to fire together 6,800 rounds per minute. The math was simple. The engineering was not. The recoil alone would shake the aircraft apart unless he reinforced the frame, and the added weight would shift the center of gravity forward, making the plane nearly impossible to fly. But it could be done. He worked through the night, filling page after page with calculations, diagrams, stress analyses. By the time the sun rose, his hands were black with graphite and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. But he had a design. February 15th, 1943. Silas requested a meeting with Brigadier General Howard Henderson, commander of the 5th Air Force. The general's office was located in a converted warehouse on the edge of the airfield, cramped and hot, with papers stacked on every available surface. Henderson was a bulldog of a man, 60 years old, with a thick neck and a voice like gravel. He had fought in the First War and carried the scars to prove it. Silas stood in front of his desk, holding the notebook. "Sir, I have a proposal." Henderson did not look up from the report he was reading. "Make it quick, Major. I've got 300 problems and not enough hours in the day." Silas opened the notebook and placed it on the desk. "I want to modify 12 B25 Mitchells, remove the bombardier stations and install 8 forward-facing machine guns in each nose, turn them into aerial gunships." Henderson looked at the sketches. His expression did not change. And what exactly would these gunships do? They'd go in first, low and fast, and neutralize the anti-aircraft defenses on Japanese ships. Once the guns are silenced, skip bombers follow up and sink the transports. Henderson leaned back in his chair. "Major, we don't have the resources to waste on experimental weapons. Every B-25 we have is needed for bombing runs." "Sir, with respect, those bombing runs aren't working. Our hit rate is less than 5%. The convoy headed for New Guinea will get through unless we try something different." Henderson's eyes narrowed. "And you think your idea will work?" Silas hesitated. The truth was, he did not know. It was a theory, a desperate gamble, but he met the general's gaze and said, "Yes, sir, I do." Henderson studied him for a long moment. Then he closed the notebook and slid it back across the desk. "Request denied." Silas felt the floor drop out from under him. "Sir," I said, "no, Major. You want to play inventor, do it on your own time. I need results, not science experiments." Henderson returned to his report, dismissing him with a wave. Silas stood there, frozen, the notebook heavy in his hands. Then he turned and walked out. He did not go back to his bunk. He did not go to the mess hall. He went straight to the hangar, past the mechanics, past the rows of aircraft, and climbed into the B-25. If the general would not give him permission, he would do it anyway. Over the next 5 days, Silas worked alone. He stripped the nose cone, removed the bombardier's seat, tore out the Norden bomb sight. He welded steel plates into the frame to absorb recoil. He scavenged machine guns from wrecked aircraft and mounted them, 4 on each side, angled slightly inward so their streams of fire would converge. The mechanics watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. Some thought he had lost his mind, others thought he was brilliant. None of them helped. On February 20th, the modifications were complete. The B-25 sat on the tarmac, its nose bristling with 8 long barrels. It looked less like an aircraft and more like a weapon forged in a blacksmith's shop. Silas stood in front of it, covered in grease and sweat, and felt a strange mix of pride and dread. He had created something new, something terrible. Now he had to see if it would fly. He needed a pilot, Someone brave enough or foolish enough to test an aircraft that might tear itself apart mid-air. That evening, in the officers' mess, he found him. Captain Jasper Maddox sat alone at a corner table, eating in silence. He was 29 years old, lean and wiry, with dark hair and a scar running along his jawline. A test pilot. The kind of man who flew experimental aircraft for the thrill of it. Silas sat down across from him. "Captain Maddox, I need a favor."
Maddox looked up, chewing slowly. "I don't do favors, Major. What do you need?" Silas slid a sketch across the table. Maddox glanced at it, then set down his fork. "What the hell is that?" "A B25, modified, 850 caliber machine guns mounted in the nose." Maddox picked up the sketch, studying it more closely. "You want me to fly this thing?" "Tomorrow morning, just a test run. See if it holds together." Maddox set the sketch down and leaned back in his chair.
"And if it doesn't?" Silas met his eyes. "Then we'll know it doesn't work." Maddox smiled, slow and dangerous. "All right, Major, I'm in." February 21st, 1943. Dawn. The modified B-25 sat on the runway, surrounded by a crowd of mechanics and pilots. Word had spread. Everyone wanted to see if Silas Thornwood's mad experiment would fly or explode. Maddox climbed into the cockpit. Silas stood on the wing beside him, going over the controls one last time. "The trigger is here. It fires all 8 guns at once. Do not, under any circumstances, hold it down for more than 2 seconds. The recoil will stall the engines." Maddox grinned. 2 seconds, got it." Silas climbed down. The engines roared to life, coughing black smoke. The propellers spun, faster and faster, until they became invisible blurs. Maddox gave a thumbs up. The B-25 rolled forward, picking up speed, the nose lifting, and then it was airborne. Silas watched it climb, his heart pounding. The plan was simple. Fly to the practice range 5 miles offshore, fire a short burst at a target barge, return. 3 minutes passed, then 5, then 10. The crowd began to murmur. Silas stared at the horizon, searching for the silver glint of the aircraft. Then he saw it. A black dot, growing larger. The B-25 descended fast, too fast, wobbling slightly. For a moment, Silas thought it was going to crash. But Maddox pulled up at the last second, leveling out just above the runway. The landing gear hit hard, bouncing once, twice, then settling. The bomber rolled to a stop, the engines cut off. Silence. Maddox climbed out, his face pale, his hands shaking. He jumped down from the wing and walked straight to Silas. "Major," he said, his voice hoarse, "that thing doesn't fly, it screams." Silas's throat tightened. "Did it work?" Maddox turned and pointed at the B-25. The nose was scorched black. Spent shell casings littered the ground beneath it. "I fired for 2 seconds, just like you said. The vibration nearly tore my hands off the yoke. The noise—" He shook his head. "It wasn't gunfire, it was a roar, like a machine eating steel." He looked at Silas, and for the first time, there was something close to fear in his eyes. "You didn't build a bomber, Major, you built a monster." Silas stared at the aircraft. Smoke still rose from the barrels. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the pride and the exhaustion, he felt a cold, creeping dread. Because Maddox was right. He had created a monster, and in 3 weeks he was going to unleash it on 6,900 men who had no idea what was coming. February 28, 1943. General Henderson summoned Silas to his office. This time, the general was standing when Silas entered. "I heard about your little stunt, Major, flying an unauthorized prototype without clearance." Silas stood at attention. "Yes, sir." Henderson walked around the desk, arms folded. "I should have you court-martialed." "Yes, sir." The general stopped in front of him. "But I'm not going to, because your insane idea might actually work. The convoy leaves Rabaul in 4 days. I'm giving you authorization to modify 11 more B-25s. You have 72 hours. Silas felt the breath leave his lungs. "Sir, Don't thank me, Major. If this fails, it's your career. If it succeeds, you'll have saved 10,000 American lives. Either way, you won't sleep well again." Henderson returned to his desk. "Dismissed." Silas saluted and left. For the next 3 days, the hangar became a factory. Mechanics worked in shifts, 24 hours a day. Welders, electricians, armament specialists. Silas moved among them, checking every rivet, every wire, every gun mount. By March 2nd, 12 B-25 gunships sat ready on the flight line. Painted on their noses were names chosen by the pilots: Relentless, Hellbound, Reaper, Iron Fang. Silas stood in front of them as the sun set, his hands in his pockets, staring at the row of machines he had built. Everett Caldwell walked up beside him. "They look ready," Silas nodded. "Are you?" Caldwell asked. Silas watched the last light fade from the sky. "I don't know." That night, intelligence confirmed the Japanese convoy had left Rabaul, 16 ships, 6,900 men, heading south. The attack was set for dawn, March 3rd. Silas lay awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. Around him, pilots slept fitfully, dreaming of the battle to come. But Silas did not dream. He thought about the men on those ships. Young men, like the mechanics in his hangar. Like Marcus Holloway once. Like himself. He thought about the choice he had made. To build a weapon that could kill faster and more efficiently than anything before it. And he wondered, for the 100th time, if he was saving lives or becoming a monster. March 3rd, 1943. 4 a.m. The airfield came alive in the darkness. Pilots stumbled out of their bunks and walked to the flight line, their faces pale in the pre-dawn light. Ground crews loaded ammunition belts, checked fuel levels, armed the bombs. Silas stood near the hangar, watching them work. He would not fly with them. His place was here on the ground waiting. Maddox walked past, pausing when he saw Silas. "Major, wish us luck." Silas looked at him, at the young man who had volunteered to fly a machine that might kill him. "Come back alive, Captain." Maddox nodded and kept walking. At 5:30 a.m., the engines started. One by one, 12 B-25 gunships roared to life, their propellers cutting through the morning mist. Silas climbed onto the roof of the hangar to watch. The first bomber, Relentless, piloted by Jasper Maddox, rolled down the runway. It picked up speed, faster and faster, until the wheels left the ground and it lifted into the sky. One by one, the others followed. Silas watched them disappear into the darkness, heading north toward the Bismarck Sea. And for the first time in months, he prayed. Not for victory, not for glory, but for forgiveness, because in a few hours, the world would see what he had created, and nothing would ever be the same. March 3rd, 1943, 8 a.m., Port Moresby, New Guinea. The operations tent stood at the eastern edge of the airstrip, its canvas walls stained brown from months of rain and dust. Inside, the air hung thick and motionless, heavy with cigarette smoke and the smell of sweat-soaked uniforms. A single radio sat on a wooden table in the center of the room. It was an SCR-274 standard issue, its dials glowing faintly amber in the shadows. Static hissed through the speaker like breathing. Silas Thornwood stood beside it, arms crossed tight against his chest. His eyes never left the radio. He had been standing there for 2 hours. Around him, the tent buzzed with controlled chaos. Officers moved in and out carrying maps, casualty reports, weather updates, messengers ran between buildings, typewriters clattered in the corner, but none of it registered. Silas heard only the static. The 12 B25 gunships had taken off from Port Moresby at 6:30 a.m., flying north across the Solomon Sea toward the Bismarck. Radio silence until contact. That was the protocol. But protocol did not make waiting easier. Everett Caldwell sat in a folding chair near the tent entrance, elbows on his knees, a cigarette burning between his fingers. His own squadron, 13 skip bombers, had launched 15 minutes after the gunships. They would hang back, waiting for the signal, waiting for Silas's machines to do what they were designed to do. Clear the path. Silence the guns. Make it possible. Caldwell smoked his cigarette down to the filter, crushed it under his boot, and immediately lit another. His hands were steady, but Silas noticed the way he kept glancing at the radio, the way his jaw clenched every few seconds. Everyone in this tent knew what was at stake. 6,900 Japanese soldiers on those ships, 10,000 American soldiers waiting on the beaches of New Guinea, outnumbered, outgunned, running low on supplies. If the convoy got through, the campaign was lost. If the gunships failed, 12 crews would die, and the convoy would sail on untouched. Silas wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. The air in the tent felt like it was pressing down on him. He wanted to step outside, breathe, clear his head, but he could not leave the radio. 8:15 a.m. A young lieutenant entered the tent carrying a folder. He approached the intelligence officer standing near the map table. "Sir, latest reconnaissance confirms convoy position. 16 ships, steady course, estimated arrival at Leh in 18 hours. The intelligence officer marked the position on the map with a red grease pencil, a small circle in the middle of the Bismarck Sea. Silas stared at that circle. Somewhere beneath it, right now, 6,900 men were going about their morning routines, eating breakfast, writing letters, cleaning rifles, completely unaware that in less than an hour, everything would change. He thought about what Caldwell had said weeks ago during the first design meeting. War is mathematics, Silas, their lives versus ours. If we don't stop that convoy, our boys die. Simple as that. But standing here now, waiting to hear the results of his mathematics, it did not feel simple at all. 8:30 a.m. Caldwell stood and walked to the table. He looked at Silas. They should be over the target by now. Silas checked his watch. The convoy had been spotted at dawn, exactly where intelligence predicted. By now, the gunships should be closing in, flying 50 feet above the water to avoid radar, approaching from the southeast, out of the sun. Maddox would be leading them in relentless. Jasper Maddox, 29 years old, the best pilot Silas had ever met. Fearless, precise, a test pilot who flew experimental aircraft for the thrill of it. If anyone could make this work, it was Maddox, but even the best pilot could not overcome bad design. And Silas had been wrong before. He thought about the first test flight. The way the aircraft had nearly stalled when Maddox fired the guns, the vibration that shook the entire fuselage, the recoil that could tear control surfaces apart if the angle was wrong. He had fixed those problems, reinforced the frame, adjusted the balance, tested it again and again until it worked. But theory and combat were different animals. Caldwell lit another cigarette. "Silas, they're fine. Maddox knows what he's doing." Silas turned away from the table and walked to the entrance of the tent. Outside, the morning sun blazed white-hot against the airstrip. Heat shimmered off the metal roofs of the hangars. In the distance, a formation of B-17s returned from patrol, their shadows sliding across the red dirt. Normal. Routine. As if the world was not about to break apart 300 miles north. He stepped back inside. 8:47 a.m. The radio crackled. Every head in the tent turned. Silas lunged forward, his hand hitting the edge of the table. Caldwell was beside him in 3 steps. Static, a low hiss. Then a voice, distant and fragmented, cutting in and out. Command. This is relentless. It was Maddox, his voice tight, professional, clipped. Silas grabbed the microphone. Relentless, this is command. Reading you weak. Repeat transmission. More static. A pause that felt like an eternity. Then Maddox's voice came through again, clearer this time. Command, this is relentless. We have visual on Convoy. 16 ships, 8 transports, 8 destroyers, formation holding, maintaining altitude 50 feet, over. Silas exhaled. His grip on the microphone was so tight his knuckles had gone white. Copy, relentless. What is your status? All aircraft accounted for. Weapons hot, no enemy contacts. Destroyers have not detected us. Repeat, we are undetected. Approaching from southeast, out of the sun. Range 15 miles. Over. 15 miles, less than 4 minutes at their current speed. Caldwell leaned closer to the radio, his face pale. They made it. Mom, but Silas knew making it to the target was only the beginning. The tent had filled now. More officers crowding in, pilots from other squadrons, ground crew. Everyone wanted to hear. Someone turned up the volume on the radio, 8:52 a.m. The static hissed and popped. Then Maddox's voice again. Approaching 10 miles, Convoy is holding defensive formation. Destroyers in outer ring, transports in center. Heavy flak visible above them. They're engaging high-altitude bombers. Silas glanced at the map. A diversionary flight of B-17s had been sent in at 7,000 feet, drawing Japanese anti-aircraft fire upward. The plan was working. The Japanese were looking at the sky, not at the sea. Maddox continued. Descending to wave height, speed 280, closing to 5 miles. Stand by. 5 miles, 2 minutes. Silas felt his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to tell Maddox to pull up, to abort, to turn around, but he pressed his lips together and kept silent. Around him, the tent had gone completely quiet. No one moved, no one spoke. Everyone stared at the radio as if they could see through it, 300 miles north to the aircraft skimming across the water. 8:55 a.m. 3 miles. I can see them clearly now. Destroyers are firing upward at the B-17 says. No one's looking down. Adjusting approach. Lining up flagship. 2 miles. Maddox's breathing was audible now through the speaker. Fast. Controlled. Silas closed his eyes. In his mind he saw the gunships. 12 silver aircraft racing just above the waves, their propellers throwing spray behind them. The convoy ahead, massive and slow, completely unaware. And on those ships men, soldiers, sailors, young men who had woken up this morning thinking they would live to see tomorrow. 9 a.m. A new voice broke through the static. Not Maddox. Someone else. Command, this is Reaper. We're trailing Relentless by half a mile. I've got a visual on the convoy from 1,500 feet. Silas grabbed the microphone. Reaper, maintain altitude. Do not engage until gunships clear the target. Copy, Command, but sir... The voice hesitated. What is it, Reaper? A pause. Static. Then the voice came back, quieter this time. Sir, I can see the deck of the transports. There are soldiers on deck. They're just standing there. Some of them are smoking. One's leaning against the rail, writing something. They have no idea we're coming. Silas felt the floor tilt beneath him. Caldwell put a hand on his shoulder. Silas, But Silas did not hear him. In his mind he saw them, young men, 19, 20 years old, standing on the deck of a transport ship in the morning sun, smoking cigarettes, writing letters home to mothers and sisters and sweethearts, just like American soldiers did, just like Marcus Holloway had done the morning before he died. They were not monsters. They were not machines. They were boys, and in less than 60 seconds, Silas's creation was going to tear them apart. He stared at the microphone in his hand. He could stop this. Right now. One word. Abort. The gunships would pull up, circle back, return to base. The convoy would sail on, and 10,000 American soldiers on New Guinea would die when the Japanese reinforcements arrived. Caldwell's voice cut through his thoughts. "Silas, it's them or us, you know that." Silas opened his eyes. He looked at Caldwell, at the officers standing around the table, at the young lieutenant near the map, barely 20 years old himself. His throat felt like it was closing. "I know." But knowing did not make it easier. He set the microphone down and stepped back from the table. His hands were shaking. Caldwell picked up the microphone. "Reaper, this is command. Maintain altitude and stand by. Do not break formation. Copy, command." The radio fell silent again. Silas walked to the corner of the tent and stood there, arms wrapped around himself, staring at nothing. He had built a weapon, a machine designed to kill as efficiently as possible, and now, in less than a minute, he was going to find out if it worked, and whether he could live with the answer. 9:02 a.m. Maddox's voice exploded through the speaker. 1 mile, they see us! Flak opening up. The sound of his breathing filled the tent, fast and shallow. "Destroyers turning, guns swinging down, 1/2 mile." An officer near the radio shouted, "Come on, Maddox." 1/4 mile, lining up the flagship, firing in 3, 2, 1. The radio erupted with noise, not words, not voices, sound, pure mechanical sound, a continuous deafening roar that filled the tent and drowned out everything else. It was unlike anything Silas had ever heard. Not the staccato chatter of machine guns, not the rumble of engines. It was a scream, a mechanical scream that tore through the air and did not stop. 850 caliber Browning machine guns firing in unison, 6,800 rounds per minute, a wall of metal traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The roar lasted 8 seconds, then it stopped. Maddox's voice came back, breathless, ragged. "Direct hit. Flagship bridges." Jesus Christ, it's gone. The whole thing just disintegrated. Another burst of gunfire, shorter this time, 4 seconds. Second ship, anti-aircraft crews. They're all dead. Switching targets. Silas stood frozen in the corner. His ears were ringing. His vision had narrowed to a tunnel. This was it. This was what he had built. Another voice broke through. "Lieutenant Reynolds, flying hellbound. Transport on my left, opening fire." The sound again. Longer this time. 10 seconds. 15. When it stopped, Reynolds's voice was shaking. "The deck, there's nothing left, it's just gone. There were men on that deck. They're... Oh, God." More voices now, overlapping, frantic. "Destroyer turning hard to port, engaging. Transport number 3, hit and burning. They're trying to scatter. They don't know where to run. Flak's wild, they're shooting blind." Caldwell stood over the radio, his face white, his cigarette burning forgotten between his fingers. Silas wanted to look away, wanted to cover his ears, wanted to run, but he stood there, listening, as the destruction unfolded 300 miles away. This was his responsibility, his design, his doing. He would not look away. 9:07 a.m. Maddox's voice cut through the chaos, loud and clear. "Skip bombers, this is relentless. Anti-aircraft is suppressed. Repeat, guns are suppressed. You are clear to attack. Over." A new voice, calm, steady. It was Major Patterson, Caldwell's squadron leader. "Copy, relentless. Beginning attack run." Caldwell turned toward the door. "I have to go." Silas looked at him. "Everett." But Caldwell was already moving. He stopped at the entrance and turned back, his eyes meeting Silas's. "You did it, Silas. You gave them a chance." Then he was gone, running across the airstrip toward the flight line where his own bomber waited. Silas stood alone with the radio. Around him, the tent had erupted in controlled chaos. Officers shouting orders, messengers running, maps being updated with red marks. But Silas heard none of it. He walked back to the table and stood over the radio listening. 9:10 a.m. The skip bombers were attacking now. Patterson's voice came through, smooth and precise. "Approaching target Alpha, range 600 yards, altitude 250, dropping in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bombs away." A pause. Then, distantly through the speaker, the sound of an explosion, a deep rolling boom. "Hit!" "Direct hit on the waterline. Ship is listing hard to starboard. She's going down." More explosions, one after another. The sound rolled through the speaker like thunder moving across a valley. Maddox's voice again. "Transports are sinking. Count 3. No, 4. 5 ships down. Destroyers are engaging skip bombers. Taking fire." Someone in the tent cheered. Others joined in. But Silas stood silent, staring at the speaker. He thought about those ships, about the men trapped inside, soldiers who had been standing on deck 5 minutes ago, smoking cigarettes, writing letters. Now they were in the water, or trapped below decks as the ships went down, drowning in darkness because of him. An intelligence officer walked past, grinning. "Major Thornwood, it's working. Your gunships are..." Silas turned and walked out of the tent. Outside, the sun was blinding. The heat hit him like a physical force. He walked across the airstrip, past rows of parked aircraft, past ground crews working on engines, until he reached the edge of the jungle. There, he stopped. His hands were trembling. His chest felt tight. He could still hear the roar of the guns in his ears. 6,800 rounds per minute. How many seconds had they fired? How many men had died? He did not want to know, but he would spend the rest of his life calculating anyway. 9:15 a.m. A voice behind him. "Major." Silas turned. It was the young lieutenant from the intelligence section. He looked nervous. "Sir, they're asking for you in the tent. The attack is still ongoing." Silas wiped his face with his sleeve. "I'll be there in a minute." The lieutenant hesitated. "Sir, are you all right?" Silas looked at him. At this boy, who could not have been more than 22 years old, who had probably enlisted thinking war would be glorious. "No, Lieutenant, I'm not." He walked back to the tent. 9:23 a.m. When Silas entered, the atmosphere had changed. The initial excitement had faded. Now there was only grim focus. Maddox's voice was coming through the radio, steady but strained. "All gunships, break off and return to base. Mission complete. Repeat, mission complete. Over." An officer near the map was updating the tally. Red X marks over ship positions. Confirmed kills, 8 transports, 4 destroyers, estimated casualties. He paused, his voice dropping. 6,500 enemy dead or missing. 6,500. Silas felt the number settle over him like a weight. Not enemy. Men. Caldwell's voice crackled through the radio. Command, this is Sledgehammer. Skip bombing run complete. All targets engaged. Returning to... The transmission cut off. Silas stepped closer. Sledgehammer, say again. You're breaking up. Static. Then a different voice. Urgent. Command, this is Reaper. We've got a problem. The tent went quiet. Go ahead, Reaper. It's Major Caldwell's bomber. I saw him take a hit. 25mm cannon. Starboard engines on fire. He's losing altitude. Silas felt his stomach drop. He grabbed the microphone. Reaper, can you confirm his position? He's about 2 miles north of the convoy, trying to gain altitude, but... Wait. A pause that stretched too long. Reaper, report! He's going down. He just ditched in the ocean. I see the splash. No shoot. Repeat, no parachute deployment. He went down with the aircraft. The microphone slipped from Silas's hand and clattered on the table. Everett, an officer, picked up the microphone. Reaper, can you confirm crew status? Negative. Aircraft went in nose first. Heavy impact. I'm circling, but I don't see survivors. Wait, there's something in the water. Looks like... Yes, I see a life raft. Single occupant. Silas grabbed the microphone back. Reaper, can you identify? Stand by. Me. The seconds crawled past. Command, it's Major Caldwell. He's in the raft. He's waving. He's alive. The tent erupted in cheers, but Silas closed his eyes and leaned against the table. Everett was alive, but for how long? The ocean was vast. Sharks, exposure, Japanese sailors in the water who might see him as an enemy. He opened his eyes and spoke into the microphone. Reaper, maintain visual contact. Mark his position. We're sending rescue. Copy, Command. I've got him. He's not going anywhere. Silas turned to an officer. Get a seaplane in the air. Now. Yes, sir. 9:45 a.m. The gunships began reporting in. One by one, they called their status and fuel levels. Most were returning to Port Moresby. Some were damaged and diverting to emergency strips. All accounted for, except one, Iron Fang, had not checked in. At 10:15 a.m., a search plane reported wreckage in the water. 4 men missing, presumed dead. Captain Vickers and his crew, flying an aircraft Silas had modified, trusting his design. And now they were gone. Silas sat in a folding chair in the corner of the tent, his head in his hands. The tent had cleared out. Most of the officers had gone to prepare for the returning aircraft. Only a few remained, quietly updating logs and reports. The radio hissed softly. Silas sat there, motionless, as the full weight of what had happened settled over him. 12 ships destroyed, 6,500 men dead. 4 American airmen lost. And Everett Caldwell, somewhere in the ocean, waiting to be rescued. All because of a design Silas had sketched in a notebook 6 weeks ago. One of the remaining officers approached. Major Thornwood, the general wants to see you. He's calling it the greatest naval air victory in history. Silas looked up at him. Tell the general I'll see him later. Sir, he specifically asked, Later. The officer hesitated, then left. Silas stood and walked back to the radio. He picked up the microphone. Reaper, this is Command. Status on Major Caldwell. Still visual, Command. He's conscious. Looks like he's injured, but mobile. Rescue seaplane should be here in 20 minutes. Copy. Keep him in sight. Will do, Command. He's a tough one. He'll make it. Silas set the microphone down. 20 minutes. He walked outside and stood in the sun, watching the sky to the north. Somewhere out there, Everett Caldwell was floating in the ocean, burned and bleeding, waiting for help. And somewhere beneath those same waters, 6,500 men were sinking into darkness. The cost of 15 minutes. The cost of innovation. The cost of war. Silas stood there until he saw the first of the gunships appear on the horizon, tiny silver dots growing larger. Then he walked toward the flight line to meet them. 12:30 p.m. 11 B25 gunships touched down at Port Moresby. One by one, they taxied to the hangar line and shut down their engines. Silas stood near the hangar, watching them land. Pilots climbed out, their flight suits soaked with sweat. Some were grinning, pumping fists in the air. Others looked shell-shocked, moving slowly, as if they were not entirely sure they were still alive. Ground crews swarmed the aircraft, checking for damage, counting bullet holes, refueling. Maddox was the last to land. Relentless, touched down hard, bouncing twice before settling. When the engines shut off, smoke poured from the nose. The entire forward section was scorched black. Maddox climbed out slowly. His hands were shaking. His face was pale beneath the grime and sweat. He walked straight to Silas. Neither spoke for a moment. Finally, Maddox said, "We did it." Silas looked at him. "At what cost?" Maddox glanced back at the bomber, at the blackened nose, at the spent shell casings littering the ground beneath it. 12 ships. I don't know how many men. Thousands. 6,500, Silas said quietly. Give or take. Maddox closed his eyes. Jesus. Iron Fang didn't make it back, Silas said. Maddox nodded. I know, I saw them go down. And Caldwell's missing. He ditched. Reaper said he's alive. Rescue's on the way. Silas nodded. They stood in silence, surrounded by the noise of the airfield. Engines, voices, the clatter of tools. Finally, Maddox said, Major, what we did today, it's going to change everything. Silas looked at the row of gunships, at the mechanics already inspecting them, making notes for repairs and improvements. I know, Maddox hesitated. Are you okay? Silas turned away. I don't think I'll ever be okay again, Captain. He walked back toward the operations tent, leaving Maddox standing alone. 3:47 p.m. The radio crackled. Silas, who had been sitting in the tent for the past 3 hours, looked up. Command, this is Rescue 1. We have visual on a life raft, single occupant. Waving, Silas grabbed the microphone. Rescue 1, can you identify? A pause. Affirmative, Command. It's Major Caldwell. He's alive? Repeat, Major Caldwell is alive. Around the tent, officers cheered, but Silas just closed his eyes and let out a long breath. What's his condition? He's burned, sir, face and hands. 2nd degree, maybe 3rd, but he's conscious. We're bringing him in now. Copy, Rescue 1, get him here fast. Silas set the microphone down. Everett was alive, burned, injured, but alive. Small victories. 5:30 p.m. The seaplane landed in the harbor. Medics rushed to the dock as Caldwell was carried off on a stretcher. Silas was already there, waiting. Caldwell's face was red and blistered, his skin peeling in places. His hands were wrapped in gauze already seeping through with blood and clear fluid, but his eyes were open. When he saw Silas, he tried to smile. It must have hurt because he stopped immediately. Silas, we did it, didn't we? Silas knelt beside the stretcher. Yeah, Everett, we did it. Caldwell's smile faded. How many? Silas looked at the medics, then back at Caldwell. 12 ships, estimated 6,500 casualties. Caldwell closed his eyes. His lips moved, forming the number silently. 6,500. The medics lifted the stretcher and started toward the field hospital. Silas walked alongside, his hand resting on the edge of the canvas. Everett, you're going to be all right. The doctors will... Caldwell opened his eyes and looked at him. Am I, Silas? Am I really going to be all right? Silas had no answer. At the hospital entrance, the medics carried Caldwell inside. The door swung shut behind them. Silas stood alone in the fading light. The sun was setting. Long shadows stretched across the airfield. In the distance, he could hear the sounds of celebration. Men drinking, singing, toasting the victory. But Silas did not join them. He walked back to his quarters, a small building at the edge of the base. Inside, the air was stifling. He sat at his desk and pulled out a sheet of paper. For a long time, he stared at it, pen in hand. Then he began to write. Dear Sarah, today I helped save 10,000 American soldiers. I built a weapon that stopped a Japanese convoy from reaching New Guinea. The generals are calling it a miracle. The pilots are calling it the greatest victory of the war. But I don't feel like a hero, sweetheart. I feel like a man who just killed 6,500 people in 15 minutes. Some of them were your age, maybe younger. They had mothers, fathers, people who loved them, people who will never see them again. And I took them away. The worst part is I'd do it again, because if I hadn't, 10,000 of our boys would die instead. That's what war is, Sarah. It's choosing which tragedy you can live with. I wish I could tell you that doing the right thing feels right, but it doesn't. It feels like drowning, like carrying a weight that gets heavier every day. I love you, baby girl. I love you so much, even if I'm not sure I deserve to anymore, Dad. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope. Then he opened the drawer and put it with all the others. Letters he would never send. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside, Silas Thornwood sat in the darkness, staring at his hands. They were clean, but he could still see the blood, and he knew, with terrible certainty, that he would see it for the rest of his life. March 15th. 1943, Port Moresby Field Hospital. Everett Caldwell sat propped against pillows, his hands wrapped in clean bandages, his face still raw from the burns. Sunlight filtered through the canvas walls of the tent, casting everything in amber. Silas sat beside the cot on a wooden chair, holding a cup of water. Caldwell could not yet grip himself. "They want to give me a medal," Caldwell said, his voice hoarse. Silas lifted the cup to Caldwell's lips, the Distinguished Flying Cross, for extraordinary achievement in aerial combat. Caldwell laughed, but it turned into a cough. "Extraordinary, that's what they're calling it." Silas set the cup down on the small table beside the bed. "You earned it." Caldwell turned his head, looking at Silas with eyes that had seen too much. "Did I? Or did I just survive while 6,500 men drowned?" Silas leaned back in the chair, his gaze distant. "We did what we had to do, Everett." "Did we?" Caldwell's voice cracked. "Because at night, when I close my eyes, I see them, the ones who jumped into the burning water. I hear them screaming." Silas looked down at his hands. "So do I." They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the sounds of the airfield continued. Engines roaring, men shouting, life moving forward as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. "Silas," Caldwell said quietly, "what we built, it's going to spread, isn't it?" Silas nodded. "Silas, General Kenny wants 100 more B25 strafers, maybe more. They're already modifying the production line back in the States." Caldwell closed his eyes. Then God help us all, April 1943. The news reached the Pacific in fragments, carried by radio transmissions and coded messages. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the Combined Fleet, architect of Pearl Harbor, was dead. Shot down over Bougainville by American P-38 fighters, intelligence had intercepted his flight plan, decoded it, and sent planes to kill him. Silas heard the news in the operations tent. An officer read it aloud from a teletype printout, his voice triumphant. "Yamamoto is confirmed dead. The bastard who hit Pearl Harbor is finally gone." The room erupted in cheers. But Silas walked outside. He stood alone on the edge of the airfield, watching the sun set over the jungle. Somewhere, Hundreds of miles north, Japanese sailors were pulling their admiral's body from the wreckage, grieving, just as Americans had grieved after Pearl Harbor. The cycle continued. Attack, retaliation, death, more death. And now Silas's creation had become part of that cycle. Reports came in throughout April and May. More convoys attacked, more ships sunk. The B-25 strafers, now nicknamed commerce destroyers by the press, were tearing apart Japan's supply lines. Every week Silas received updates, numbers, statistics, enemy losses. April 18th, convoy near Wewak, 4 transports destroyed. May 2nd, supply run to Rabaul, 6 ships sunk. May 14th, troop convoy off New Britain, total annihilation. The numbers climbed, 1,000 dead, 2,000, 5,000. And with each report, the weight on Silas's chest grew heavier. June 3rd, 1943. Silas was walking back from the hangar when he saw them. A column of prisoners, Japanese soldiers captured during fighting on New Guinea, being marched toward the POW compound. They were young, thin, their uniforms torn and filthy. Some limped, others stared straight ahead with hollow eyes. Silas stopped walking. One of the guards, a corporal, noticed him and saluted. "Major, just bringing in the latest batch from the front." Silas nodded, but did not speak. His eyes moved across the faces of the prisoners. And then he saw him. A Japanese officer, mid-20s, walking near the end of the column. His right arm was in a sling, and a bandage covered part of his head, but his eyes were alert, sharp. As the column passed, the officer's gaze met Silas's. For a moment, neither looked away. Then the column moved on. June 7th, 1943. Silas could not stop thinking about the officer, about the look in his eyes. Not hatred, not fear, recognition. As if they both understood something the others did not. On impulse, Silas went to the POW compound. He showed his identification to the guard and asked to speak with the Japanese officer. The guard hesitated. "Sir, regulations say—" "I'm aware of the regulations, Corporal. I'm not interrogating him. I just want to talk." The guard relented. They brought the officer to a small tent used for interviews. A translator, a young private who spoke Japanese, sat between them. The officer's name was Lieutenant Ryota Fujimori, 24 years old, formerly of the destroyer Shiranui, which had been escorting a convoy when it was attacked in early April. Silas sat across from him, studying the man's face. Fujimori spoke first, his voice calm. The translator relayed his words. "You are the one who built the weapon." Silas blinked. "How do you know that?" Fujimori smiled faintly. "The guards talk. They are proud of their gunships. They say an engineer designed them, a man named Thornwood." Silas leaned back in his chair. Fujimori continued. "I commanded 400 men on my ship. When your aircraft attacked, I was on the bridge. I saw them coming, low. So low I could see the pilots' faces." He paused. "I ordered my men to fire, but we were too slow. Your guns." "They did not stop. They tore through the bridge, through the deck, through my men." His voice did not waver. 370 of them died in less than 2 minutes. Silas felt his throat tighten. "I'm sorry." Fujimori looked at him, his expression unreadable. "Are you? Or are you proud that your invention works so well?" Silas met his gaze. "Both." Fujimori nodded slowly. "At least you are honest." The translator shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Silas leaned forward. "If you were in my position, would you have done the same thing?" Fujimori considered the question. "Yes. To save my soldiers, I would have done anything, just as you did." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. stained and worn. He placed it on the table. This was found on one of the transports, a letter, written by a private named Daichi Ishikawa. 19 years old, he was writing to his mother. The translator picked up the letter and read it aloud, translating as he went. "Dear Mother, we are on our way to New Guinea. The officers say it will be an easy voyage. I am not afraid. When I return, I will bring you a gift from the islands. Please do not worry about me. I will be home soon. Your son, Daichi." The translator set the letter down. Silas stared at it, unable to move. "He did not make it home," Fujimori said quietly. "He drowned when the transport sank. His body was never recovered." Silas picked up the letter with trembling hands. The ink was smudged, the paper fragile. "Why are you showing me this?" Fujimori leaned back in his chair. "Because I want you to understand. The men you killed were not monsters. They were boys, sons, brothers, just like your soldiers." Silas set the letter down carefully. "I know." "Do you?" Fujimori's voice sharpened. "Or do you tell yourself they were the enemy, and that makes it acceptable?" Silas looked at him, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know anymore." Fujimori studied him for a long moment. Then he stood, as much as his injuries allowed. "Then you are wiser than most men in war, Major Thornwood, because you question what you have done." The guard entered and took Fujimori back to the compound. Silas sat alone in the tent, holding the letter. He read it again and again, and when he finally left, he folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. It would stay there for the rest of his life. September 1943. The war continued. The B-25 strafers became standard across the Pacific theater. Over 100 had been built. Modified versions appeared, some with 12 guns instead of 8. Others with rockets and cannons. The press called them flying destroyers. Newsreels showed them attacking convoys, their guns blazing, ships exploding in their wake. America celebrated, but Silas did not. He refused every interview request, declined to attend award ceremonies. When General Kenny personally offered him the Distinguished Service Cross, Silas quietly asked that it be given to someone else. "I don't deserve it, sir." Kenny frowned. "Major, you saved thousands of American lives and took thousands of others." Kenny leaned back in his chair. "That's war, Thornwood, you know that." "Yes, sir, I do." Silas left the general's office and never spoke of it again. January 1944, statistical reports filtered through headquarters. Japan's merchant fleet losses had reached catastrophic levels, 60% of their transport capacity destroyed. Supply lines to New Guinea, the Solomons, and the Philippines severed. The strafers had done their job. But Silas took no pride in the numbers. At night, he still saw the burning sea, still heard the screams, and no amount of whiskey could drown them out. August 1945. The war ended. Silas was in Brisbane when the news came. Japan had surrendered. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki had forced the emperor's hand. People flooded the streets, cheering, crying, embracing strangers. Silas stood on the edge of the crowd, watching. He thought about all the ways humanity had found to kill itself. Bombs, bullets, fire, and he thought about his own contribution to that long, bloody history. A stranger clapped him on the shoulder. "We won, mate, we bloody won." Silas nodded, but he did not smile. October 1945. Silas returned to the United States. He was offered a position at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, designing the next generation of military aircraft. He declined. Instead, he took a job with Boeing in Seattle, working on civilian transport planes, machines built to carry people, not kill them. His wife, Elizabeth, met him at the train station. She looked older, tired, but when she saw him, she smiled. Sarah was 12 now, tall and serious with her mother's eyes. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Daddy, you're home." Silas held her tight. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm home." That night, after Sarah went to bed, Elizabeth sat with him in the kitchen. "You're different," she said. Silas looked at her. "How?" "Quieter, sadder." He stared into his coffee cup. She reached across the table and took his hand. "What happened over there, Silas?" He wanted to tell her, wanted to explain the weight he carried, the faces he saw in his dreams, the letter from a 19-year-old boy that he still kept in his jacket. But the words would not come. "I built something," he said finally. "Something that saved a lot of lives and took a lot more." Elizabeth squeezed his hand. "You did what you had to do." Silas shook his head. "That's what everyone says, but it doesn't make it easier." She stood and came around the table, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "You're home now. That's what matters." But Silas was not sure he would ever truly be home again. 1946 to 1955. Silas worked, designed aircraft, raised his daughter, lived a quiet life. But the past never left him. He followed the news, the development of new weapons, jet fighters, guided missiles, and, years later, the gunships that evolved from his original design. The AC-130 Spectre, flying fortresses bristling with cannons and machine guns, his legacy growing. Sarah graduated high school in 1955. She was 18, beautiful, full of dreams. At her graduation party, she asked him the question he had been dreading. "Dad, what did you do in the war?" The room fell quiet. Friends and family turned to listen. Silas set down his drink. "I was an engineer. I designed aircraft." "What kind of aircraft?" He hesitated. "The kind that helped us win."
Sarah smiled, proud, but Silas felt only the weight of the lie. Later that night, alone in his study, he pulled out the letter. Daichi Ishikawa's letter. The paper was yellowed now, the ink faded. He read it one more time. Then he placed it back in the drawer. October 1957. Manila, Philippines. Silas was on a business trip, consulting for a new airline route. The work was routine, straightforward. On October 12th, he boarded a small cargo plane for a short flight to Cebu.
The weather was clear, the pilots experienced, but 15 minutes into the flight, the starboard engine failed. The plane banked hard, losing altitude. The pilots fought to regain control, but the second engine sputtered and died. They crashed into the jungle, 3 miles from the airstrip. There were no survivors. November 1957. Seattle, Washington. Elizabeth Thornwood stood in her husband's study, going through his things. Papers, blueprints, notebooks, filled with calculations and letters. So many letters. She found them in the bottom drawer of his desk. Over 200, sealed in envelopes, addressed but never sent. Letters to her. Letters to Sarah. Letters to men whose names she did not recognize. She opened one at random. "Dear Everett, I hope your burns have healed. I hope you've forgiven me for what I built. I haven't forgiven myself. I don't think I ever will. Silas." She opened another. "Dear Sarah, when you were born, I promised to build you a better world. Instead, I built a weapon. I hope you never have to understand what that means. I love you. always, Dad. Elizabeth sat down at the desk, tears streaming down her face. At the bottom of the stack, she found a folded piece of paper. Not a letter. Something older, written in a language she did not understand. She took it to a translator. It was Japanese, a letter from a soldier to his mother. The translator read it aloud. When he finished, Elizabeth closed her eyes. Now she understood. March 3rd, 2024. The Bismarck Sea, a research vessel, floated above the wreck site. Divers descended into the clear blue water, cameras in hand. 70 feet below the surface, the remains of a Japanese transport ship lay on the seabed, covered in coral and silt. The divers moved through the wreckage slowly, respectfully. In what had once been the cargo hold, they found bones, dozens of them, still scattered where the men had fallen 81 years ago. One diver noticed something half buried in the sand. He brushed it away carefully. A rusted helmet, Japanese, and inside a small metal box. He brought it to the surface. When they opened it, they found photographs, letters, personal effects, and one letter, written in faded ink, addressed to a mother in Kyoto. It had never been sent. The research team logged the find and sent it to a Japanese historical society. Months later, they traced the letter to a family, the descendants of Daichi Ishikawa. His great-niece, Yuki Ishikawa, an elderly woman of 82, accepted the letter with tears in her eyes. March 3rd, 2024. Kyoto, Japan. Yuki Ishikawa sits in her small home, surrounded by photographs of ancestors she never met. Her hands, spotted with age, tremble as she holds the letter. Her grandchildren sit around her, quiet and solemn. She reads it aloud, her voice breaking. "Dear Mother, we are on our way to New Guinea. The officers say it will be an easy voyage. I am not afraid. When I return, I will bring you a gift from the islands. Please do not worry about me. I will be home soon. Your son, Daichi." She sets the letter down carefully and picks up a photograph. A young man in uniform, smiling. Her grandson, a boy of 10, asks quietly, "Grandma, did he come home?" Yuki shakes her head. "No, sweetheart, he did not." She looks at the children. "But I want you to remember him, not as a soldier, not as a number, as a boy who loved his mother, who wanted to come home." The children nod, understanding more than she expects. Yuki places the letter in a frame and hangs it on the wall next to the photograph. A boy who never came home, one of 6,500, March 3rd, 2024, National Museum of the United States Air Force. Dayton, Ohio. The B25 Strafer sits in the center of the exhibit hall, restored to pristine condition. 8 machine guns protrude from the nose, gleaming under the lights. A plaque beside it reads, "The B-25G Strafer revolutionized naval warfare in the Pacific." Designed by Major Silas Thornwood in 1943, this aircraft could deliver devastating firepower against enemy ships. Its success at the Battle of the Bismarck Sea marked a turning point in the war. Sarah Thornwood stands in front of the aircraft. She is 86 years old now, her hair white, her hands frail, but steady. A young reporter stands beside her, recording the interview. "Mrs. Thornwood, your father designed this aircraft. You must be very proud." Sarah is silent for a long time. "Proud," she says finally. "That's an interesting word." The reporter waits. "My father never talked about the war, not really, but I found his letters after he died, hundreds of them. He wrote about the men he saved and the men he killed. He wrote about a Japanese soldier, 19 years old, who drowned because of what he built." She looks at the reporter. "He carried that boy's letter with him for 12 years, until the day he died." The reporter shifts uncomfortably. "But he saved American lives, thousands of them." Sarah nods. Yes, he did, and he knew that, but he also knew the cost, and he lived with it every single day. She turns back to the aircraft. People see this plane and think of victory, of American ingenuity, of heroes. She pauses. My father saw it and thought of the boys who never came home, on both sides. The reporter does not know what to say. Sarah reaches out and touches the cold metal of the fuselage. He told me once near the end that innovation is a double-edged sword. It saves lives, and it takes them. And the line between genius and monstrosity, she trails off, is thinner than anyone wants to admit. A door opens at the back of the hall. An elderly man enters, walking slowly with a cane. He is Japanese, perhaps 70 years old. He approaches Sarah hesitantly. "Excuse me," he says in accented English. "Are you Sarah Thornwood?" Sarah turns. "Yes, I am." The man bows slightly. "My name is Kenji Ishikawa. I am the grandson of Daichi Ishikawa, the soldier who wrote the letter your father carried." Sarah's breath catches. "You... How did you find me?" "The museum told me you would be here today. The 81st anniversary." He looks at the B25. "I came to see the aircraft that..." He stops, searching for words. "The aircraft that changed my family's history." Sarah and Kenji stand in silence, looking at the machine. Finally, Kenji speaks. "My grandmother received my grandfather's letter after 81 years. It was found in the wreckage of the ship." Sarah's eyes fill with tears. "My father would have wanted to know that." Kenji nods. "Your father, he was not a monster. My grandmother said this when she read the letter. She said, 'The American who built this weapon, he must have suffered too, because only someone who understands suffering would keep my son's letter for so many years.'" Sarah wipes her eyes. "He did suffer, every day." Kenji looks at her. "Then perhaps they both found peace. Your father and my grandfather, in knowing that even in war, there is still humanity." Sarah takes his hand. "Thank you for that." They stand together in front of the B-25, two descendants of the same tragedy, separated by an ocean and a war, united by understanding. The reporter watches, no longer recording. Some moments are too sacred for cameras. The Bismarck Sea, present day. 70 feet below the surface, the ocean is quiet. Sunlight filters down in golden shafts, illuminating the wreckage of ships that have rested here for 81 years. Coral has grown over the steel. Fish swim through corridors where men once walked. Nature has reclaimed what war destroyed. In the cargo hold of one transport, the skeleton of a ship's hull lies open to the sea. Inside, among the bones and the rust, 8 machine guns from a crashed B-25 rest on the seabed. The guns are silent now, covered in barnacles and algae, but they remain. A monument to the 15 minutes that changed everything. On the surface, the sea is calm. The waves roll gently, as they have for millions of years. Below, in the quiet, 6,500 men rest. Not heroes, not villains, just men who wanted to live and didn't get the chance. The final words of Major Silas Thornwood, written in October 1957, 1 week before his death, found in his personal effects. "They ask me if I regret what I built. I tell them no, because regret implies I had a choice, but I didn't. None of us did. We were trapped in a machine greater than ourselves, a machine called war. In that machine, the only choice is to survive or to die. I chose survival. For my men, for my country, for my daughter. But survival came at a cost. 6,500 lives, 6,500 mothers who never saw their sons again. I carry every single one of them. I will carry them until the day I die. And maybe after. We built them fast because men were dying faster. But speed is not righteousness, and efficiency is not justice. If there is a lesson in all of this, it is this. The distance between genius and monstrosity is not measured in miles or years. It is measured in the weight of what we are willing to carry, and some weights never get lighter.